Right then, you sports knowledge deep divers. This is a complex and very emotive issue that includes the rights and responsibilities of everybody involved, including those who transition, the athletes they perform against, the possible athletes they may displace from sport, the authorities who govern sport, and the public who have an interest in the subject. This film's intention is to explain and offer insight. It's not to persuade or convince. I won't say there's a lot of ignorance about this topic, but there are a lot of opinions, and a lot of these opinions are not formed by facts and by some people who simply do not like the idea or may well be transphobic. Let's start with some terminology. Transitioning or to transition is where someone adopts permanently the outward or physical characteristics of the gender one identifies with, as opposed to those associated with one's birth sex. Transgender is an umbrella term that describes people who identify with a gender that is incongruent or different from the one assigned to them at birth. Gender is that assigned at birth and is generally based on physical sex characteristics in a binary way. Gender binary is the concept that there are only two gender options, male or female. A medical professional may say a baby is male or female depending on what the medical professional observes about the baby's body. For example, a baby with a vulva will be labelled a girl, and a baby with a penis will be labelled a boy. Non-binary gender, on the other hand, is an umbrella term that describes those who feel their gender identity is outside or in between male and female identities. For example, a person who experiences both identities or neither of them. Cisgender describes a person whose gender identity is the same as their sex assigned at birth. The word cisgender is the antonym of transgender. The prefix cis is not an acronym or an abbreviation of another word. It's derived from Latin and means on the side of. The normal healthy testosterone range for cis women is between 0.3 and 2 nanomoles per litre of blood. Women with polycystic ovarian syndrome tend to have higher testosterone levels, which can reach 5.2 nanomoles per litre of blood. Healthy male testosterone ranges range from 8.3 to 32.9. Disorders or differences of sex development, DSD, is a broad term used for medical conditions in which development of sex chromosomes, gonads, or sexual anatomy is atypical. DSDs are subdivided into groups in which the labels generally emphasize the karyotype's role in diagnosis, such as 46XX sex chromosome, XX sex reversal, ovotesticular disorder, and XY sex reversal. Any human may identify their sexual orientation as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or none of these. Put simply, sexual orientation is about who you are attracted to and maybe fall in love with. Gender identity is about who you are. To date, I have heard nothing that tells me that athletes are transitioning purely to excel in sport. A lot of individuals understand fully their sexual orientation at puberty, and the last thing on their mind, I dare say, is them competing in elite sports sometime in the future. However, if you think this will never happen, you are living in a world with clouds and cuckoo clocks everywhere. Athletes take performance-enhancing drugs and cheat, knowing they may well get caught, banned, or much more. Morals and fair play left sport a long time ago. The rewards in sport for some outweigh the risks associated with cheating. Remember, we have had athletes win gold medals in Paralympic sports pretending to be eligible to participate. I can only imagine the complexities, both physically and mentally, of transitioning. What must seem like the obvious thing to do for the person involved could easily be made very complicated by a whole raft of influences. You cannot legally change your gender in at least 47 United Nations member states, and there are 13 countries currently who specifically criminalise transgender people. You only have to ask Google to find out who they are. Those who do transition are able to change their passports, birth certificates, identity documents, and body, both internally and externally, and they certainly should be able to participate in sport just like everybody else should. The issue when it comes to transgender athletes in sport seems to be mainly males transitioning and participating in female sport. Females transitioning into male sport has its issues, but much less in terms of performance and more to do with their own safety in contact sports. Sumerian and Akkadian texts from about 4,500 years ago document transgender or transvestite priests known as Gala. Transgender is nothing new, and there is an estimated proportion of gender-diverse individuals, those who are not cisgender, that varies between 0.1 and 2% of the population. For obvious reasons, the data cannot be exact, but we have quite reliable lower and upper limits. There are currently around 8 billion of us on Earth. 0.1 to 2% equates to between 800,000 and 160 million gender-diverse persons right now. The population of the world is growing, and so the numbers will grow proportionally as well. We are seeing more and more transgender athletes on the world stage now. The reasons why are obvious. People on the whole are now a lot freer for many reasons to identify with the gender they feel they are, even if they don't have the physical characteristics of that gender. So earlier, I have said that everyone should have the right to be able to participate in sport. So how can we ensure that everybody can participate and compete? And also, how can this participation take place in a fair manner? The simplest solution to the whole debate would just be have one big open field. Indeed, why have women's, or for that matter, any categorisation of sports such as weight or age at all? Why do we have one male and one female world or Olympic champion? Why not just have one? Of course, the answer is obvious, and the women's category is needed to give those who will not get the benefit of androgenization, which is basically testosterone during puberty and adolescence, the chance to compete in sport. Women's sport is a protected class for good reasons, and these boundary lines cannot be broken. Androgen literally means male making, and what these hormones do, at least from the perspective of sports performance, is to drive what are called secondary sex characteristics. They include lean mass, strength and power, reduced fat mass, stronger bones, larger hearts, increased hemoglobin, skeletal structure, and more. Watch my film on whether females can beat the males in sport, and you will realise that without the protected category, or sport, with very few exceptions, would be completely male-dominated at the elite level. No woman would even qualify for the Olympic Games. There is an exception in equestrian events. No woman would ever get a scholarship. There would be no potential for an upset, like a woman winning. Just about every elite level of sport would be completely male. Given that women's sport has historically been discriminated against, and indeed women in wider society have been too, females are now well on their way to complete equality in sport. It makes sense to defend the line that separates the classes. Without the category, as just mentioned, about half the world's population suddenly lose the opportunity to win in elite sport. So quite rightly, women's sport is protected. The protection is needed for several reasons: to ensure fairer competition, and also it is protected to ensure an element of control over the safety of all the athletes. We will learn later some of the effects of testosterone on the body, and this includes its size. The gender categories are not the only ones in sport. For similar reasons, as just mentioned, we have weight categories in contact sports, and also Paralympic sport has clear classifications for its athletes. In 2019, a rapper named Zubi identified as female and broke a woman's deadlift world record without even trying, in his own words. This was more a publicity opportunity, and I presume sometime soon after he identified back as a male. So what's to stop this happening time and time again? The policy in place by most sports is modelled on one proposed by the IOC, which says those who transition are eligible to compete in the female category under the following conditions. The athlete has declared that her gender identity is female. The declaration cannot be changed for sporting purposes for a minimum of 4 years. The athlete must demonstrate that her total testosterone level in serum has been below 10 nanomoles per litre of blood for at least 12 months prior to her first competition, and also with a requirement for any longer period to be based on a confidential case-by-case evaluation, considering whether or not 12 months is a sufficient length of time to minimise any advantage in women's competition. The athlete's total testosterone level in serum must remain below 10 nanomoles per litre of blood throughout the period of desired eligibility to compete in the female category. And compliance with these conditions may be monitored by testing. In the event of non-compliance, the athlete's eligibility for female competition will be suspended for 12 months. These are the IOC guidelines set in 2015, and by their own admission, they need revisiting. What is not required is legal recognition of the person's gender identity or surgical anatomical changes. So, because Dutee did not lower his testosterone levels for 12 months prior to this deadlifting demonstration, all he did was just confirm what we already know, and that is, in sport, men outperform women. So it's all sorted then. The IOC have created and enforced the guidelines that regulate the issue, and this keeps everybody happy. Well, they have made the rule, but it certainly isn't keeping everybody happy. Laws that would ban transgender women and girls from competitive school sports have been filed in dozens of states in the USA. A bill filed in North Carolina read, "Sex shall be recognised based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth." Some sports, such as rugby union and athletics, have different rules. World Rugby currently bans transgender women from international women's competition. They say the ban is necessary for fairness and that there is a 20 to 30% greater risk of injury when a female player is tackled by someone who has gone through male puberty. There is talk by some governing bodies of possibly having 2 years of hormone therapy before allowing participation. We know that currently a male to female athlete is allowed to compete only if they show they've kept their T levels below 10 nanomoles per litre of blood for some sports and 5 for others for at least 12 months. This is aimed, in theory, at taking away the advantage enjoyed by biological males. However, transgender male to female athletes more than likely retain some degree of biological advantage even after lowering testosterone levels. Studies in trans women show that lean mass and strength decline after 12 months of lowering testosterone by about 5%. The typical advantage in mass and strength that biological males enjoy over females is between 20 and 100%. And in terms of performance, as shown in my film, Males versus Females, about 10% in most sports. So the transitioned athlete, even after a 5% loss, will still have an advantage. If this is the case, namely that some advantage remains even after lowering testosterone, then it will have massive implications for women's sport, because it would theoretically allow a sub-elite but very good male to compete as an elite female simply through declaration or self-identification and compliance with the current policy. In effect, if the policy doesn't remove the advantage, then surely we would see Olympic podiums, world records and elite sport dominated by transgender male-to-female athletes. We will talk about Caster Semenya shortly. So why hasn't this happened? Allowing transgender male-to-female athletes to participate under the current testosterone-lowering guidelines, some say the performance adjustment or impairment after reducing testosterone is large enough, and that is why the female category isn't overrun with transitioned athletes. Also remember that they have spent at least a year out of competition. Others, including me, say that the male to female athletes who have tried to enter women's sport simply haven't had the necessary athletic potential or calibre to win after a 5 to 10% decline in performance. At 5% impaired, only very, very good men could win medals in women's sport. So maybe this level of athlete as yet hasn't transitioned. As well, we seem to be focusing on elite sports. The impact is likely to be much larger at the levels below that, where the majority of sport is played. That's where a 5% drop in performance may have even more meaningful impacts, because it's the steep part of the curve, where a less than elite biological male might become successful in the female classification, winning smaller events or getting selected on teams that compete at the next level up. There is also a range of sports where the advantage will never disappear. This is particularly true where anthropometry, including stature, height, limb length, etc., are crucial for sports performance. Lowering testosterone may reduce hemoglobin, muscle mass, strength, power, and cardiovascular capacity, and it may cause fat mass to rise, but it's not changing the skeleton. Some might muddy the waters by saying height in basketball and volleyball and VO2 max in long-distance endurance events are poor predictors of performance. Height in basketball isn't the most important determining factor in performance. Michael Jordan was never the tallest in the Chicago Bulls team. Or take VO2 max, which everyone knows is crucial for endurance sports success. If we studied elite male and female endurance races, it would be impossible to determine who was the fastest based solely on their VO2 maxes. So does this make the height and VO2 max of transition male to female athletes an irrelevant factor? Of course it doesn't. Many sources report a global average height for women at 5'3" and for men 5'7½", and male VO2 maxes are significantly higher than females. There is a very real chance that the male to female athlete will benefit from the previously gained androgen-fueled benefits long after transitioning. Not everyone, but overall, on average, they will. In the majority of sports, a good big one will always beat a good little one. Some also point out that testosterone is a poor predictor of performance within women and within men. There is little or no evidence that testosterone is responsible for the performance differences, and even men with high testosterone don't always beat women with low testosterone. Therefore, why should we regulate testosterone but height, body shape and VO2 max be ignored? Testosterone is just one part, although undoubtedly important, of sporting performance. However, it is the only thing that can be controlled. All of this brings us to regulation. Sports authorities are in a very unenviable position here. They are trying to be inclusive, which I'm sure we all agree is a good thing, but in doing so, they have opened themselves up to criticism on how they are managing the attempted inclusion. By including everybody and possibly creating a new seemingly unfair or dangerous playing field, they risk excluding others. The great irony is that they are then accused of discrimination. It's actually their attempts to be inclusive, albeit in an imperfect way, that allows for this criticism. So where do Caster Semenya and others in her situation, such as Dutee fit into this debate? Caster Semenya's gender is female. She is legally female, was from birth raised as a female, and identifies as a female. Indeed, there has been no question of her gender. Semenya has a hormone disorder causing her to have naturally high levels of testosterone, the condition being categorized as 46XY DSD, which is the most common intersex condition among female athletes. The presence of a Y chromosome causes the development of testes. These do not descend from the abdomen, but they do produce testosterone. Athletics has introduced more stringent regulations for those DSD and transgender athletes with circulating testosterone of 5 nanomoles per litre of blood or above, and who are androgen sensitive. One criterion is that the DSD athlete must use medication to reduce their blood testosterone to below 5 nanomoles per litre of blood. Remember, this level of 5 is well above the upper limit in the range of cisgender females. This rule was challenged and went all the way to CAS, who found World Athletics DSD rules were discriminatory, but CAS ultimately decided they were justified to provide fair competition for women with normal testosterone levels. Put simply, on one hand, it is the right of every athlete to compete in sport, to have their legal sex and gender identity respected, and to be free from any form of discrimination, it said. On the other hand, it is the right of female athletes who are relevantly biologically disadvantaged vis-à-vis male athletes to be able to compete against other female athletes and to achieve the benefits of athletic success. There have been many legal challenges across all areas of sport to ensure fairness and gender equality. Maybe it will need some more high-profile transgender legal challenges to push forward the science and get some definitive and reliable research completed. So we all probably agree that there is going to be at least one group of people, more than likely the cisgender females, that are going to be unfairly affected by the participation in sports by DSD and transgender athletes. So is there anything that can be done to make the whole situation fairer? Keep everybody happy? There are a few obvious scenarios or ways I could see this go. These are in no particular order, and I don't agree with all of them before you get started on me. These are just possible solutions. The first is to leave it as it is, the 5 and 10 nanomole levels of testosterone, and just say hard luck to the cisgender ladies. We hope you don't get beaten by too much or possibly end up injured or worse. Also, just hoping for the best that the cisgender classification of sport isn't overrun in the future by transitioned or DSD athletes. A second option is to reduce both transgender and DSD athletes to the 5 nanomole level. This will possibly make it fairer, but as we have said, we do need much more research, and the skeletal advantage would still exist. A third option is possibly working at the current levels or even the reduced level of 5 for everyone, but with 2 years at the agreed lower level instead of the current 1 year before competition is permitted. Again, much more research is needed. A fourth option is to have all testosterone levels of DSD and transgender athletes below the current maximum levels of the cisgender women, i.e. below 2 nanomoles per litre. This might certainly make the competition fairer, but I'm sure there are some medical specialists very quick to point out the health risks associated with such a significant change in testosterone levels. A fifth option might be to have DSD and transgender only sports and allow participation at everyone's natural testosterone levels. Where there is little or no chance of a new category in sports, the numbers just don't stack up. It would not be feasible. Could there be a new category or classification possibly in Paralympic sport? Please remember that the Paralympics got their name from the Stoke Mandeville Games for wheelchair athletes, which run parallel to the Olympics. It has nothing to do with any physical conditions the athletes may have. Well, anyway, I'm sure moving DSD and transgender athletes into the Paralympics is a legal and moral minefield where few will want to tread, so the chance of DSD and transgender athletes competing without hormonal therapy is remote. How about no hormonal therapy, but permit them to participate in male sports? Well, for sure, there will be many legal challenges to this, and somewhat ironically, some might say that this is unfair on the transgender athletes and DSD athletes having to compete against males. And a final option might be that all transgender and DSD athletes are just not permitted to compete in cisgender sport. I know some of you will see some of these options as quite controversial, but this film started by describing the issue as complex and very emotive. The truth is, there is absolutely no perfect solution. Whatever the policy, someone will not be happy with it. I really do look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject in the comments below, but please must insist these comments are suitable for a public forum, and we won't tolerate any bullying or comments of a transphobic nature. Please feel free to correct or advise me if I have made any factual mistakes or if the situation changes over time. Thanks for watching, and as I have said, I really look forward to hearing your views on this topic. I'm creating quite a library of films all related to sport, and I'm sure you will find some of them very interesting. I'm producing new ones all the time, so please subscribe and hit the like button. Not only does it really help the channel, but it makes sure you don't miss out on the new releases. If you are interested in sport, please check out my book with thousands of the best sports facts and jokes. It's available online and in all good bookshops.